Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. Let's make a banjo strap. Now we're going this route because our guitar player at church plays a beautiful banjo and he's quite the artist, but his strap is nylon. I know, and what makes it worse, the strap connects to the banjo with string. Oh, it is high time a leather crafter got involved here. So let's help out Nathan and all of our banjo players with a nylon strap. Now, a little bit different connection from a guitar. We'll talk about that. But also, I bet our banjo players are going to want a good rustic look. We can absolutely do that. All right. So anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's start off with our pattern. This is going to look like a complicated pattern. It really isn't. We've got digital pics. We'll look at those shortly, but we're going to talk about what we're doing first. Now, may look complicated simply because I've combined our stamp design pattern with our main body pattern. In fact, on the main body, we only punch 4 holes. Now, typical length for guitar banjo, about 48 inches. So we're going to come in just a little bit. And in fact, that's an odd size, 41 3/4. That's so that will accommodate our stamp design. But then we're going to add a strap to both ends. Like I said, different attachment for a banjo, but we're going to add a 1-inch strap. We'll cut 2 here, and that's going to make our strap adjustable up to 8 inches. Now on our stamp design, this center design, it's always been one of my favorite designs. Well, let's spread that out. So right here, that's going to be our stamp design. In fact, we can see it a little bit better right here. I've added an antique. That's what we're going to do. No dye, straight antique. But right here, there's our design. And we're going to run this down the full length of our strap. Now, on this end, on both ends, we're a little bit more rounded. So we're going to round that off. But we could bring that to a point. Right here on this inside design, I like this. We've got a flat scalloped. Makes a cool design running down the middle of our strap. But what we could do, we could always go with some spots. Maybe smaller, larger, smaller. We could add in concho. We could braid that. So many ways we could go. I could get on a roll here, but we're not going to do that. That's going to be our design, and that's going to recur all the way down. The reason I say that, we don't have to make a full strap. We'll cut a blank to length. We'll mark for our stamp design, and then we simply scoot and mark. Makes the whole thing very easy, very consistent. All right. Let's jump over to our digital pick. So on our main body, we're going 2 inches wide. We're going to taper that down to 1 inch. We've got our marks on both ends to punch our holes. And we've got our red marks. That's going to be our stamp design. So we're going to give that a spread. 1/2 inch, 7/8, 1/2 inch, 7/8. We'll get a better look at the stamp design once we step over to our punch table. Now on our smaller strap, 1 inch by 17, we're going to drop in 2. That's going to match right here, and then our size holes. All right, so we've got a good feel for what we're doing. Let's step over to our main table, cut some leather. If we're going to stamp or carve a project, let's go with our Shaheen leather. This is going to give us the best possible outcome. Now, 2 big points here. First off, when we step up to a quality leather, it's a game changer, simply because it's going to make our work look better without any increase in our skill level. But the second point, this just does everything better. We're going to wet form, antique, dye, top coat, world of difference. Like I said, game changer. All right, so on our main strap, we're going 2 inches by 41 3/4. Now, we can use our wooden strap cutter, and we will, but for this, typically our straight edges, our 48s, are 2 inches wide. So, got a little bit of a cut here. Let's overcut just a little bit. Let's cut up to maybe 42 1/2 inches. Now, new blade, sharp blade, absolutely. And let's trim to size, 41 3/4. There we go. All right, let's reset, cut for our taper. When we cut our taper, we simply could drop this in, scribe, and cut. But let's use our wooden strap cutter. That's going to give us a very clean line. All right, so how do we mark for this? Let's bring our pattern down. Now, right at the top of my flat, or my straight cut, I'm going to make a mark on either side, okay? With our wooden strap cutter, we're going from 2 inches down to 1 inch. So we need to drop 1/2 inch either side. So I've got my wooden strap cutter set at 1/2 inch. Now the blade sits in about 1/4 inch. So what I'd like to do is I want to overshoot that mark by about 1/4 inch. Yeah, there we go. Stopped almost right on the nose. Good. Same thing on this side. Yeah, there we are. Very nice. Same on the other end. And there we go. Very nice. Let's step over to our punch table. Now again here, we could simply scribe in our lines and cut. But let's go with our 1 inch English punch. So with this, I can spread these out. I can see exactly where the end of my cut is. I'm going to bring that down. There we go. Nice even taper. Same on this side. Yeah, there we go. All right, same on the other end. And there we are. We've got 2 nice tapers. Now we would do a round end punch, but we're going to wait on that for a good reason. All right, let's go get this ready to stamp. We're using a quality leather. We're going to do this right. We could simply wet our leather, and our dressing sponges are great for that. I tend to cut these down, makes them go a little bit further. But again, we're working with a quality piece of leather. So we're going to case this. So overview, we're going to get it wet, get our leather wet, let it air dry for a minute. Then we're going to put it in a baggie. Leave it in there for 3 hours to 5 days. We'll take it out. We'll let it continue to air dry because we want it to start to return to its natural color. Now let's start just by running our strap. We're going to run this through our water a little bit slowly. And if we feel like we get too much water, that's okay. We can just let it air dry just a little bit longer. Okay, so 1 pass through. Let's come back. Give that 1 more slow pass. And there we go. Okay. Now let's lay this out. Let's give this about 1/2 hour. Let some of that excess moisture evaporate out. Then we'll drop this in our baggie. We've given this about 1/2 hour. Now I can feel it. Definitely got a moisture content. It's heavy, it's pliable, but it doesn't feel over wet. Now the point of this, 2 points actually. First off, we're softening the fibers in the leather. But secondly, we're getting that water, that moisture, to distribute consistently across the piece. Here's the downside of that. Say we just wet with a sponge. We've got a lot of water on this end and not so much down here. When we stamp on this end, it's going to be deep and mushy. It's not going to look good. Down here where we've got very little water, it's going to be hard to get an impression into the leather. All right, so let's take a baggie. Let's just roll this up. Put this in the baggie. Like I said, we're going to leave this 3 hours to maybe 4, 5 days. And there we go. We've got that. While that's casing, let's cut our straps. We're going with our Shaheen leather for our main body. Let's go with this for our strapping. This is our 4 to 5 ounce Shaheen leather natural strap. So here we're going to need 2 1 inch by 17. So on our wooden strap cutter, let's come back to 1 inch. Add a little extra tight to that. And let's strap out 2 at 1 inch. Yeah, notice how easy that moves through our leather. New or sharp blade there. All right, so let's cut to 17 inches. And we've got a little scrap there, but 1 inch, 4 to 5 ounce strapping, never going to go to waste in my shop. All right, so now let's mark with our awl. So we've got 2 and 6. We've got those marked now on our revolving punch. This is a great punch. It's a heavy duty, but it's also a compound action. So for those of us who don't have a lot of strength right here, that's a great tool. Now on this, we're going to go with lace to lace these together. So let's go with our largest tube. Okay, we've got that. Let's reset, work on our edges. We're going to groove and edge both sides, then we'll punch our round end. Same thing on our main body, simply because, to me, very difficult to get a consistent groove line on a smaller round end. But if we just run off the end and then clip it, looks very clean, very professional. So on our groover, let's start here. I'm going to set that. That's a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. Let's groove once. Now, we'll do the same thing on the main body. I want to groove deep enough to pick up some of our antique. So let's just come across that one more time. Give it a nice deep groove. There we go. All right, I'm going to do the same thing to the other 3 sides. And a second pass there. Good. We've got good deep groove lines. All right, so over to our edger. We're going to go with a number 1 edger. We're on a 4 to 5. So let's do both sides, both straps. Good, we've got that. Now let's flip these over. This is never, or the flesh side's never going to edge as easy as the top grain, but we're just trying to knock off that hard edge. Yeah, that's all we're looking for there. All right, let's step over to our punch table. Since we're not going through a buckle here, we're going to go with a 1-inch round end punch on both ends. Now, we could simply clip the corners if we don't have the tool, but worth every penny. So let's start right here. Yeah, there we are. Now, here's what I was talking about. So right here, I've got a grooved round end. Doesn't look too bad. I think we can see that. Doesn't look bad, but I can't always count on that. Here's where I'm going with this. If we're not confident on the smaller straps with a groover, let's just run off the end, then punch. Actually, that looks pretty good. All right, let's start stamping some leather. We've given this piece overnight. Now, we need to be careful here because the leather, very impressionable. Easy to make a mark in it. Well, that actually looks just right, consistent all the way across. Now, last step here, we're going to let this sit out. We're simply going to let this air dry because we want this to start to return to the natural color or the original color. Right now, let's give that, I would say 45 minutes. We'll take another look. We've given our strap right about 45 minutes, maybe a little bit more. Now, it's still a little bit wet, but it's going to take me a minute to get my camera shot set up for when we stamp. So we're going to start now, but I can feel it. Doesn't necessarily feel wet, but I feel moisture in it. It's got some good weight to it, but the body is starting to return. Good. So let's mark this. And we could start either end, but let's go ahead and mark for our punch holes, for our lace holes. Now, on our red marked holes, these are just marks to help us line up our stamp. So I don't want to make a real heavy mark, but if we go lightly, then our stamp will overstamp that. So let's get this set done. Good. Now, again, recurring design. So let's just scoot that down. There we go. And I'll work my way down to the other end. And let's see. There we go. Almost perfect. And in fact, that's why we're at 41 3/4 inches in our length. And let's mark that last hole and our punch holes. All right, now let's go stamp some leather. We're going to use 3 stamps here. Now, technically, this is an hourglass border stamp. It's one of my favorite stamps, but to me, really, it's more of a geometric. It makes all kinds of cool designs just by itself. But right here on our marks, now I don't know how well the camera can see that. I think we can see it, but right here on this flat edge, I'm going to put that right between the two marks, and I want to do my best to get this to line up as parallel as I can make it with our edge. Nice impression. Now I'm a little bit light over here. We can always drop that tool back down in that impression, work over that way. What we're looking for here is consistency. So I'm going to go all the way down and all the way back up the other side. Then we'll jump over to our veiners. And some of those certainly could have been a little more parallel to our edge, but I don't think we'll see that. Next up, we're going to go with our largest veiner. This is 22 millimeters. We're right in that neighborhood. And we're going to bow these in from the edges of our stamp. Then let's do this side. I'll flip it around, then we'll see the pattern. There we go. There's our pattern. Very cool. We're going to add to this, but let's do this all the way down both sides. And that does look so good. We've got a couple of things going on here. So right here, we've got our stamp designs. But notice in the cased leather on that veiner, we see every detail. But also right here, got kind of a paw look. And then on the inside, we've got that scallop, flat scallop. That's looking pretty good, okay? On our end down here, in fact, we're going to stay with our longest. So let's take our longest veiner. We're going to come from the outside point to that mark. Okay, now let's take our 17 millimeter, or right about that. We're going to come from that inside to that same mark. Good. Same thing on the other side here. Okay, nice ending on that. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Yeah, and I like that scalloped point as well. But a couple of things here. First off, this stamp would actually sit very nicely right there. And it'd give that little three-toed end to both sides of that. So many ways we can go with this. I'm going to leave it right where it is. Well, actually, let's do one more small detail. Now, I didn't describe this at great length, but what we've got a 1/2 inch spread. That's our flat, and then our longest of our veiners, that's right about 7/8 of an inch. So our measurements there, 1/2 inch, 7/8. Now, on this, like I said, we've got this small, very cool paw design. Let's take our stylus. We've got our ballpoint, and I'm just going to put, yeah, there we go. Nice little detail. I'm going to do the same thing all the way down, and we are done stamping. And our last three. Now, that's a little tedious, but in all honesty, certainly is a nice touch. Very good looking pattern. And I love this point. That almost has a claw feel to it. When we look at it at an angle, so many cool things here. This is going to look good. Now, I pressed in with our ballpoint a little bit heavy, hoping that our antique is going to sit in those holes as well. Can't wait to see this come together. All right, so we need to give this at least overnight to dry. We've given our strap ample time to dry, overnight in fact, and it looks good. Now we can see our design, but once we add our antique, all the difference in the world. Now right here, our design, a little bit more rounded. We've got kind of a hard corner here. So let's just round that a little bit. I'm just gonna make 3 cuts. I'm gonna cut that corner. Now, sharp blade, new blade every time there. We've got that a little bit rounded. Well, now let's just cut those 2 points. Yeah, there we go. Once we slick that, that'll be a nice round point there. Good, there we go. Same on the other end. Good, we've got that end rounded. Okay, next up, on our strapping, we cut a good deep groove to pick up that antique. Let's do the same thing here. I'm going to make 2 passes, both sides. And a second pass. Good, we've got nice deep grooves on that. Next up, we're going with an 8 to 9 ounce here. So let's use a number 2 edger. I'm going to do all 4 edges, top grain and flesh side. And there we go. Now on the back again, not going to edge as easily as our top grain, but we're just knocking off that hard edge. All right, so on this end, we could always go with a round end punch, but our corner knives, absolutely one of the best tools in my shop. So this is the 30 millimeter. Let's just clip off our ends. Yeah, there we go. Looks good. All right, last step here. Back to our revolving punch. We're going to go with our largest tube. And there we go. Well, that looks nice. Very cool. Let's reset, add our antique. We're not going to dye our project. We're going to go with our vintage gel. Let's see what this looks like. Now, it's pretty dark. It's going to add a lot of color to it. So even if we go with a light brown dye, that's going to bring that down a good bit. If we go with something like a walnut, that's going to be very dark. But just by itself, this actually is going to look good. But let's do this. Let's flip our project over and we're going to add tape to the back. Because to me, there's nothing worse than big splotches of antique. And this can be a mess. Now, we've got our edge right here. We've come in with our edger. So what I'd like to do is I want to bring my tape in to the inside of that edge. Good. Now, right there, that's going to protect the back. No rub off. But that's going to give us a very straight line. That's going to look nice. Now, a little bit harder to come around our corners, but we can do that. So let's tape the back of our main body and both of our straps. Now our tape on the back does not have to be perfect, does not have to look good. We're just doing our best to protect the back of the strap. Yeah, there we go. More than good enough. Right here, we can just trim that off with our knife. Now over here, tape's 1 inch, strap's 1 inch. But we've got a very small edge there, so I'm not going to really worry about that. Let's just do our best to get that as centered as we can. And that's really all we need there. We're just protecting the back. All right, looks good. So let's add some antique. Much like antique, we're going to slowly rub this across our project with a rag. Then we'll come back with our dauber and we'll get this gel down inside of our stamp designs. So let's start on one end. Now, unlike a die, and very much like an antique, this is not going to be consistent like a die would be. All right, we've made one pass. So now let's use a dauber. And I'm going to get my antique to sit down inside of that nice deep groove line, but also down inside of our stamp designs. Yeah, there we go. Sinking into our groove lines and our stamp design. Okay, that looks good, but as I look back, I've got a lot of little misses. So I'm going to take care of those. And that looks good. Okay, now let's jump over to our edges. Okay, we've got that, but now when we lay this over, notice we've got some natural edge still left there. So let's hit that with our gel because the tape is going to give us a good straight line. And we've got our edges done. Let's come back across. All right, well that looks good. So I'm going to do the same thing to our two straps. Good, we've got both straps done, very nice. Let's set those aside. Let's give those about an hour dry time. We've given this about an hour dry time and it looks good. So next up, we're going to go with a top coat. This is going to enrich in the dye color, give it a little bit of gloss. Now it looks like we've got gloss already, but really top coat's going to do two things. Protect us from the leather and the leather from us. So on this, let's go with a simple cotton rag. This is our Be Natural. This is a beautiful top coat. It's not going to give us a lot of gloss, but again, it's going to enrich in our dye color. So let's start by simply rubbing some on. All right, we've got our main strap. Same thing on our two smaller straps. Good, we've got that, so let's give that about 5 minutes dry time. And there we go, 5, maybe 10 minutes. So now I'm going to take a soft cotton rag and let's just start to buff. Yeah, that looks good. Now, a couple of points right here. That lighter dye right there and there, that's going to make me crazy because I want this consistent, not the point of a vintage gel. That's exactly what we're looking for. That looks used and loved. All right, let's do the same thing to our strapping. We've got those. In fact, yeah, those look good too. All right, let's take our tape off. In all honesty, could have done a little better job taping. Not bad down there, but down there, not consistent at all. Should have paid a little more attention there. Okay, next up, in fact, we're almost done. We're going to slick our edges, add some lace. We're finished here. So now let's go with some gum trag. It's a great agent, gum tragicant. Tough to say, but this will give us a nice slicked edge. So I'm going to apply this with my cotton rag. Now I'd like to come back, there we go, just get some of the excess off. Now let's slick with our slicker. Now the point here, not pressure, more heat and friction. We don't want to press down so much that we develop a lip on the top grain. And down and back. Okay, starting to get a good slick there. But now let's step over to just a simple cotton rag and let's just fine tune that. Down and then back up there as well. I don't know if the camera can pick up that gloss, but to me, 2 points to a slicked edge. First off, looks good. But secondly, when we run our hand across that, actually feels good. Nice and smooth and glossed. All right, same thing on the other side. And there we go. We've got both edges done. Feels good, looks good. Same thing on our strapping. Our straps are done. Everything looks good. One more step. Let's cut some lace, put this together. We can cut our own lace in a weaver. We've got all kinds of great options in leather that make great lace. But how about this? Let's go with our 1/8 inch Latigo. We've got some good strength here. The dark brown is going to look good. And we just need about 18 inches. Now when we add our strapping, we can always add that to the back. Just circle around. Or I could be a little bit happier with the vintage gel right here. So let's bring this in on the front. Circle around to the back. Yeah, actually that looks pretty good. Let's pull that through, top grain out on our lace to the front. And let's just tie a simple square knot, right over left, circle around. And left over right, circle around. Good, there we go. Very nice, clean. But also we could put our knot on the front if we want a more rustic look. Same on the other end. And there we go. We've got a good looking banjo strap here. Now typically I dye, so the flesh side's got some color to it. I could be a little happier with that, but all told there, no rub off, highly adjustable, looking good. I love the leather here. And as I look at this, I still have a small miss here and there. I don't think anybody's gonna see that. That's a good looking banjo strap. I'm a drummer, so I don't happen to have a banjo handy, but nonetheless, I bet that's going to make your banjo player very happy. I hope you have a great time making your banjo strap, and I hope it is gorgeous. Good luck with your projects.